Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show. I'm super excited to be here with you today and our very special guest who's Dr. Tracy Brower, who is a sociologist and the author of 2 books, The Secrets to Happiness at Work. Dr. Tracy Brower provides insights for joyful work and life and how to choose and create purpose and fulfillment. She is also the author of Bring Work to Life by Bringing Life to Work. And that book provides a new perspective and alternative ways to consider and achieve work-life balance. Tracy is a regular contributor to Forbes.com and Fast Company, and also principal with the Applied Research and Consulting Group at Steelcase. Tracy is an award-winning speaker and has over 25 years experience working with global companies, clients to achieve business results. Tracy is also an avid reader, which I'm super excited about. She's been featured at TEDx as a speaker there, which you must tune into, which is available on YouTube. And she's been featured in many publications, websites, and done numerous interviews and podcast shows. Tracy is on a mission to help you find your purpose, fulfillment, and joy in work and in life. So Dr. Tracy Brower, welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast and welcome to our global audience. I'm super excited to be here with you today and really grateful and honored.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. You've just made my whole day. I really appreciate being here with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
So Dr. Tracy Brower, before we dive into your books, are you happy to tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. You talked about all the professional aspects. I think I love to read. I love to write. Writing is my therapy. It's the way that I think. I do it every weekend. It's just a way to work through things for me. I'm married. I have 2 children who are 23 and 19. We have a little dog. We live in a state with lots of winter time, and also we're really close to Lake Michigan. So love to walk and be outside and enjoy the lake shore as well. So yeah, I definitely don't have it all figured out, that's for sure, but really enjoying life as it is.
Wow. And how did you actually get into wanting to really, I guess, research this whole happiness at work, or what makes someone happy at work, or feel a sense of purpose or joy?
Yeah. The thing that I noticed is I heard so many people talking about work as drudgery, work as being really separate from the rest of their life, work as this kind of negative experience. And I just think that we can think about it differently. I was doing a presentation to a group and I asked people, what's your favorite part of your work? And somebody yelled out, paid time off. And somebody else yelled out, weekends, which I thought was just so funny, right? Like that's the case for enough people. The best part of work may be when we're not at work. But I think we have the opportunity to choose and create the conditions for happiness at work. And the idea that we have empowerment to do that. And, businesses and leaders and communities have the opportunity to help create some of those conditions as well. But I just think that work is a part of life, and it really can be a source of that fulfillment and that joy that we talk about.
We spend so much time at work. So it's really interesting that you picked up that most of the time we spend is at work. But then if we're not happy at work, that can really affect our mental health, can't it?
Yes, so much. In fact, for my first book that you mentioned, I did this research on spillover, and there's tremendous spillover from work to home. If I'm really happy at work or not so much, that makes a difference at home. And likewise, there's such a spillover from life into work. And so it's a myth that they're actually such separate things. And our mental health is part of who we are holistically, not just, in a containerized idea where I have a certain level of fulfillment and health at work and a certain level at home. They intersect so much because of the holistic nature of our lives and ourselves.
Wow. And what if we're not happy all the time? Like, does that mean there's something wrong with us? Like, some of us have fallen into jobs, say, out of high school, or perhaps people are listening now, tuning in and thinking, I've got this job that doesn't really make me happy, but I'm happy with the money. Like, I can't do without the money. People have gone, I'm okay with putting up with unhappiness. I just need the money.
Yeah.
But how
Yeah.
can you turn that thinking or that thought pattern around? Is there a way we can do a job for more than just the money?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've said so much in that question. I think there are three different ways to kind of think about this. One, we don't have to be happy all the time. Like, I think we've gotten to this point of almost like happiness inflation, where we think we have to be happy every single minute or we're doing something wrong. And in reality, happiness will ebb and flow, and that's okay. And we don't have to be more happy every minute, right? That's the happiness inflation, that it really is okay that it ebbs and flows. And we can have an overall sense of joy and contentment, even if it's ebbing and flowing. That's one. I think another is that sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to have this amazing work and this big purpose that we're accomplishing. And it's really okay if we're just satisfied with what we do. It's really okay if we feel like we're making a contribution of some kind, because all work has dignity. And I think sometimes we can take the pressure away from ourselves in a really healthy way and not feel like we have to have this big mountain we're climbing or big, world impact that we're having. We can just do good work and make a good contribution to our employer, to our teammates. So that's the second thing I think to think about. And I think the third thing is, if you're not loving what you're doing, there really are some things you can do about that. And there are kind of three ways to think about that. One, you can change the way you think about it. I love the saying, change your thinking, change your life. Like if you're thinking about work as drudgery, maybe reframe it and think about the contribution that you're making, or the way that you're able to bring home a paycheck to your family, and the time that you get, outside of work with your family, that kind of thing. So the first thing you can do is change your thinking. The second thing you can do is think about, do you have some influence at work? Can you impact on other people? Can you make small changes? Can you really empower yourself to have that impact? And then the third thing is to think about, do you want to opt out? Is there other work you could do? Could you learn towards something else? Could you think about a different step in your career? And can you kind of find some new doorways that you might be able to go through? So I think those are three ways that I think about what was so much in the question that you were asking.
Yeah, because it's interesting. When we're looking at our passion, our purpose, and our happiness, they're all related. But do you feel that sometimes we can put so much pressure on ourselves to need to have all three at a workplace? And, we need to be changing the world at the workplace, or we need to be the CEO at the workplace, or the entrepreneur, because there's such a culture now of the hustle culture. Like, have a day job, then you've got to work on a side business or a side hobby, and you've got to become successful in your side hobby. But is it okay if we have a job, we turn up and we contribute in a great way, an ethical way, hardworking way, but then we have a side hustle or a passion, but it can stay a hobby? Like
Yes.
we don't have to take it to the next level, even though every motivational speaker is like, work on that side hustle, build that business. But what if we're just happy to make it our passion and purpose, and stays the side hustle?
Exactly. I love that. I think, that to me is the thing that makes so much sense. And it was really interesting. We went through college visits for our daughter, and she's now graduated from college, and we went through college visits with our son, and he's in college now. And it was just so interesting because at all of the college visits, it was all these slides about, come to this school, you will change the world, you will do amazing things, you will blah, blah. And I think that no matter who we are and no matter what our life path is, we can feel that pressure. Like, I've got to change the world. I've got to solve world hunger. I've got to solve world peace, right? And I think it's really smart to just do the next thing that makes sense. Just do the next thing that you enjoy. Just do the next thing where you're making a contribution to another human. That might mean making breakfast for the family. Maybe it means taking the dog for a walk. Maybe it means, getting together with friends and providing support if they're going through a stressful time. Just do the next thing that makes sense, that brings you joy and other people joy. And I think that's super fair and super healthy in terms of removing that pressure. And I've been thinking about this idea that you brought up where we tend to, this hustle culture and this intensity, we tend to want to monetize everything. And I think partly that's come from social media and the internet, right? Like, if I make beaded jewelry, all of a sudden I can sell my beaded jewelry. But, maybe I just want to make beaded jewelry because I like to make beaded jewelry. My mom used to help take care of our kids when they were little. And she had this early education background. And she used to say, it's really more about the process than the product. Like if the kids are making macaroni necklaces, it doesn't matter if the macaroni necklaces are beautiful at the end of the day. It's the process, it's the making, it's the creating. And I think we need to remind ourselves about that as grownups too, like make your beaded jewelry and don't feel like you have to monetize it. That tends to ratchet up the pressure, and we can just enjoy doing the things we like to do. And that's really fair.
Yeah, and it's interesting what your mum shared there about, and what you also shared, it's about the process and enjoying the process, and not everything we make has to be sold or monetized. And what can be challenging, Tracy, for businesses now, isn't it? If you have your full-time employees and then they're working on their side hustle at night and they're not getting enough sleep and they're turning up exhausted, we've all found ourselves in this position in one way or another. I'm sure our listeners can resonate. Then that can affect your work, your daily work tasks, or the way you feel at work because you're so tired, because you've been hustling all night. Do you see that in your work over the many years, a transition where people are getting even more burnt out, not necessarily from the day job, maybe the day job and the night job?
Yes, completely. And what's so interesting is I think a lot of times when we're doing the hustle, when we're doing all the side work, we're making this investment in our future self. Like we think somehow our future self will be happier than what our present self is. And if we just put in the work today, by goodness, we can get to the point that we're happier tomorrow, right? And ironically, the more you try to get happiness, the more you struggle for happiness, the more you pursue happiness, the less likely you are to find it. It's like sand through your fingers at the beach, And the reason is because inherently, the process of seeking happiness reminds you of what you don't already have. It reminds you that you lack something that you're chasing. And in fact, there's some beautiful research on the more materialistic we are, the less likely we are to be happy. And in fact, the more grateful we are, the more likely we are to be happy. So there's something about if you love doing it, go for it. And at the same time, if you're doing it in order to get something else, it may be less helpful. It may be helpful to kind of slow down in order to speed up and focus maybe a little bit more on self-care and focus on gratitude and focus on generosity instead of that kind of chase and instead of that hustle.
I love that, because when you were saying just focus on that gratitude, just focus on those things, I couldn't help think, I always say, if you're happy to do something for the love, whether the money comes or doesn't, it really doesn't matter. It's a bit like me with the podcast show. When I create for the love, nothing else matters. I just am so in flow with the process, and it's not about the money. It's not about the monetizing. So there's no pressure. It's just what I love. And, and you love to read books and interview incredible authors like yourself. So that hustle culture totally goes out the window. But Dr. Tracy Brower, what can people do if they're in a workplace? There are other people that really annoy the beep out of them. I'll say it, crap out of them. How can they approach finding happiness at work when they're not really happy with the people they work? They either don't gel, there's conflict, he said this, she said that, and this whole spiraling happens. We know through Buddhist practice that gossiping about anyone doesn't serve anyone's highest value, that it's not really a practice, and that obviously whinging about other people isn't great for our mental health. Actually, I think there's research now where it can really affect the longevity of our life and actually shorten it. But what can people do? They're sitting at work. Mary J really has said something they don't like. They're stewing inside. This is the typical scenario. They want to say something, but they won't. They, a minute they can get to that drink fountain there or the coffee machine, I've seen it all before working in corporate offices. How can we practice, I guess, more kindness or empathy or less judgment at work?
Yeah, it's all about kindness and empathy, right? One of the things I think is super interesting is the more you understand about people, a lot of times that helps, right? So there's the great advice to stay above the fray, take the high road, don't engage in the drama, kind of remove yourself from it. Those are all really good ideas. And I think the other thing is to kind of learn more about people. Like if somebody's super annoying, if you understand kind of more about where they're coming from, if you understand what challenges they're facing, if you understand more about what they're up against, I think that helps us be more empathetic toward them. And I think, that idea of just always being kind is such a huge one. And I think we have to make choices about like where we're going to speak up and where we're not. And I love the idea of kind of a 2x2, like in terms of the problem, how big is the problem or the issue, small, medium, large, right? And then on the other axis, how much can I influence it, small, medium, large? And if it's a tiny problem and I don't have much influence, maybe it's just something I can let go, right? If it's a huge problem and I don't have much influence, it might be an opportunity to make a different choice, like to remove myself or to, choose a different option. If it's a problem that is one where I have more influence, then gosh, maybe I want to think about how I speak up. How do I influence the system, or how do I influence the person, or how do I influence the situation in a positive manner? And how do I remind myself that I can be empowering? The other thing I would say is that sociologically speaking, the number one way that people learn is through watching other people. You're not consciously aware of it, but we all have a huge influence on others just through our own behavior. So the way that I interact, the way that I demonstrate who I am, the way that I just show up with you on a moment-to-moment or day-to-day basis really has an influence. And so I think when we can kind of bring our best, right, and we'll have good days and bad days, but when we can bring our best, it really has an influence on others. And I think we can remind ourselves of that influence that we have.
Wow. And if we are applying more empathy, more observing, more, it's nearly like mindfulness practice at work, really. But can that in turn, because I often find when you stay out of the drama or when someone else is whinging about someone else or talking about them behind their back or bitching is the word, we'll say it, that if you stay completely out of that discussion and you step away or you don't comment or you don't engage, that happiness and you can feel much happier at work by not getting sucked into the drama. So you have to be aware and then nearly take it with mindfulness in a sense. You know, what is this going to bring to me if I just stand here and agree with them or listen, or like, does it take some awareness, self-awareness to practice this mindfulness at work and compassion and empathy?
Yeah, of course. Yes, you're so describing emotional intelligence, right? Like really understanding where I am, checking in on where I am. And I think we can be mindful too that sometimes by just not speaking up, we might be participating, we might be complicit, right? Like if we're in a group gossiping, even if we're not saying anything, just the fact that we're present might send an unintentional message that we're on board with it, right? And so I think we need to be mindful of our own perspectives and then mindful of the choices that we make and how we're modeling for others. Even if we don't mean to be an example, we often are. I think the other thing to think about is I've always loved the idea that what you focus on gets bigger. If you put tons of energy into something, like you give that thing energy, you make that thing bigger, right? So if there's drama and you're putting a lot of investment and energy into it, it might become bigger. There's somebody who said to me not too long ago, the wolves you feed are the ones who will have more power. And so you want to think about like, no, I'm not going to feed that particular wolf, you know, like I want to, if I can remove focus from it in an appropriate way, right? I'm not denying, I'm not repressing, but I'm just choosing what I'm focused on. And I think that's where sometimes gratitude can be a great idea, right? Like I'm going to focus on what I'm grateful for. I'm going to focus on what I'm learning. I'm going to focus on the positive elements. Maybe there's one positive element out of 10, but I'm going to focus on that one, darn it. And hopefully that one will start to snowball and start to have a greater influence on my own thinking. There's some wonderful research on our own attitudes and our own perspectives. And it literally colors how we take in information. There was this study where people were asked about their attitude and their point of view before the study, and then they were given a news article, and then they were asked what they saw in the news article. And literally it was the same news article, but if they came into it with a negative view, they saw different facts in the news article than if they came into it with a positive view. So our ability to kind of manage that thinking, our ability to really be intentional about where we put our energy will make a really big difference in how we see things and then how we're able to interact as a result. It's kind of a virtuous loop that we set up, a reinforcing loop.
Wow, that's incredible. And when we come to, say, our spa therapists, many who work in spa are there because they want to serve and help others. They're very hands-on healers, passionate. For them, it's all about making someone feel better and happier. Definitely not about the money. So they really fall in this unique realm of service and helping and fulfillment and purpose. But if there is someone who is doing a job that is really boring and they feel no sense of purpose, passion, happiness, service, is there something that they could do? Can they sit down and write about all the things they love and try and figure out, okay, here's an example when I used to love to talk. Hence why I got a talk show podcast, but love to talk. But when I would sit in a cubicle in the office, I wasn't allowed to talk. No talking allowed. Obviously, there's a very big disconnection there. Me trying to do this job that requires all people to be very quiet, not speak, head down, bum up, process, admin isn't going to be long-term for me. So is there any techniques, Dr. Tracy Brower, that someone could do or a process to really work out what they like?
Yes, I love that question. I have a model in the book, The Secrets to Happiness at Work. And I talk about, it's really helpful to think in your work, what are the things that you have to do? What are the things that you don't have to do in your work? And then think about, what do you love to do? What do you not love to do, right? Like, we all have things we love and all have things we don't love. And the more overlap you can get between those, the better. Ideally, the things you're required to do in your work are things you love to do. And so a couple of things about that. One, we will always have things that we don't love about our work. And I think one of the myths of happiness is that if you make the right choice, you'll be perfectly happy. But every choice we make is going to come with pros and cons. I'm going to pick a partner, and mostly I love things about him. And then honestly, there are just those couple things that just really annoy me, right? Or I'm going to pick a place to live, and there's a lot I love about the place I live. But, there are things that aren't my favorite. And a job is like that too. So it's really good to be cool with some things that you just don't love about it. But if the majority of the things aren't wonderful, then you may need to make another choice. And the other thing that I like to think about is, like, what's the future, right? Like, if you're in a job that isn't a perfect fit today, but you're on your way to something else and you're kind of learning on your journey, that's still a great thing to spend time on. But I really like that idea of, what do you have to do? What do you love to do? And how do you get the greatest overlap, the greatest intersect of those? And it really is fair if you've found your way to something and it's not a perfect fit, that you might want to do something else. That's okay. And sometimes it's the right vocation, but it might be the wrong company or culture or the wrong people. Maybe it's not the right vocation and you love the company or the culture or the people. And so that's important to think about too, is all of the aspects of that value equation, all of those variables that affect your happiness. Try to be clear with yourself about which of those are working and which of those aren't, so you can make good choices from there.
I love that process that you just took us through, which is part of in the book, because it really just allows you to see, obviously, if you love people and then your job, you're not even having any people contact with variety of people, there you already know that in your next transition, you'll be wanting to work in some form or with some company or business that you're just working with people all day, every day. So it's really incredible. Now, Dr. Tracy Brower, through COVID-19, we all went into lockdown. We all experienced now working from home, doing like we're doing today, but we're on Zoom meetings. It's just been a completely big shift in work culture. We're now going through a process of returning back to the office, and many people are expressing that they actually really liked working from home. What are you seeing throughout your work? You work with many companies, you write for Forbes.com. what shifts are you seeing in the workplace now and with the people working from home?
Yeah, we are seeing globally that people are really appreciating the greater flexibility they have, and they want to continue to have a level of choice. And globally, we're seeing this expectation for hybrid work, where more people will probably work in more places over time. And I think that we're also seeing that not just people want that, but companies are more willing to meet people where they are. I think we're seeing this pendulum shift where companies are becoming increasingly empathetic and increasingly people-oriented, and companies that are so understanding the centrality and the strategic importance of well-being. And I think that's all a really good thing, because I think when we start with people and do the right thing for people, then business benefits absolutely come. We know that statistically. We absolutely know that happiness is correlated with business outcomes. And when we create cultures that really demonstrate positive conditions for fulfillment, that has great outcomes for businesses. And I think that we want to get back to the office, and we want to be in a place where we contribute, where our work has meaning. And so it's also really fair that companies are going to hold us accountable for results and want to see us come into the office again or come into the spa again. And if we're really honest, we want to be together with other people too, right? Like, we want to rebuild our social capital, rebuild our relationships. You talked about, all the people who work in the spa industry who want to make a positive impact. And that is very much about a hands-on, person-to-person, very personal relationship that you're developing. And I think we want to embrace that. I think we want to be happy to get back to that as well. So it will be a both and, right? Like, people who can work in new ways and have more choices than ever, and who are glad to get back to the meaning of their work and to making a real contribution to their companies.
And do you feel that now companies will always, or businesses will always be in that pivot mindset, which is, okay, if there's an outbreak, another lockdown, that's okay, we'll pivot. We've now done this working from home. It was successful. We're now used to it. We can do it. Do you feel that there's this real pivot mindset still, and that will continue moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I really like to think that we have built our resilience and we've built our adaptability as individuals and as teams and as organizations. And I do think that I think that we'll get more back to the way that we were. I mean, humans kind of tend to go back into the groove, right? And at the same time, when we go through incredible amounts of disruption, we have this opportunity to think differently, to accelerate, to innovate, to really find kind of new areas for growth. And so I think especially because we've all been going through this collectively, globally, we're at this moment where we can start doing things differently. And I think when companies are really smart, they will be setting the expectation that what we come back to won't be perfect to start with. We will be learning, we will be failing, we will be figuring it out, we will be getting better and better over time. So hopefully we have this growth mindset as individuals and as companies, this learning mindset, this challenge mindset. And honestly, we tend to be happier when we're challenged. Like, there's a lot to be said for, sitting on the beach or sitting on the couch with our feet up, reading a book, right? Like, that's beautiful. Rejuvenation is a beautiful thing. And we also know that we're happy when we're challenged, when we're figuring something out, when we're sweating, both literally or figuratively, when we're really, really trying to solve a problem that we don't already know the answer to, and it's pushing us. Those are good things. And so that growth mindset that we can always get better is definitely something that could be a positive outcome of all of this.
I love that, this growth mindset. It's so true. And you're right, we can get so bored in what we did or were doing but that challenging, looking for new opportunities, like thinking differently, thinking outside the box has really encouraged people to, like, it's nearly like they had a brand new job happen as soon as COVID-19 happened, because so many brands I saw and companies started creating hand sanitizer, which was something that they once didn't do, but in order to help with the demand. So we just saw businesses completely, after say 30 or 40 years, doing a brand new product, which once didn't have anything to do with what they did. So it just goes to show you, like you said, that growth mindset, or that ability to adapt and be resilient. And I want to ask Dr. Tracy Brower, there'll be so many people, sadly, who have lost their job. So they're probably tuning into the podcast show going, how can I be happy at work when I don't even have a job? Or, and I, first of all, my heart goes out to anyone who's lost their job or business during the global pandemic. And I can see you nodding your head there, Dr. Tracy Brower, because I'm conscious that so many people have. We've been really fortunate in Australia where we've had some financial assistance, and whilst maybe that's never enough, at least it's been something, which is always better than nothing, because I know some countries don't even have a government social security system. So I feel that most of us who have a job are actually so grateful that we have a job. Yeah. So I guess I feel that the happiness at work spiked purely from gratitude, like super grateful I have a job, super grateful. But for someone who hasn't got a job, you are so optimistic. You do so many podcast shows, so much writing. You're very big on there are still opportunities out there. It's like you've got this growth mindset or an opportunity mindset. Can you speak to that person who's tuning in, who doesn't have the job, but what are you seeing now with opportunities arising?
Yeah, it seems like new opportunities really are starting to arise. And I love your example where in some cases the opportunities came when companies had to reinvent themselves, right? And I think we can do that at an individual level too, like as things start to unlock, as we get back to greater health globally, please heaven that that's on its way, right? We're seeing the signs toward that. Not everywhere yet, but in general, we're starting to see that ball rolling forward. I think we'll see this unlocking. I think we'll see these new opportunities that people can look for. And this might be an opportunity to reinvent as well. Like the job that you had may not still be there. Maybe the industry that you were in has completely shifted, but there may be new ways that you can think about your talents, your capabilities. What are the things that you've always loved? And what we've loved to do may not have to be a certain job, right? Like I love talking to people, or I love serving people, or I love listening, or I love managing projects. Any of those are super transferable skills. So the idea of like figure out what those skills are and what you enjoy doing, and then try to be creative about what that match might be in terms of jobs or industries. And I think we have to, I saw a LinkedIn post actually from someone today, and she said, I'm in this process of trying to find another job, and it's soul sucking and it is ego wrenching. It can be hard, right? Because you have to look for so many different opportunities before you find just the right one. And it's always this match game where I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me to find the right match. And I think we just have to remind ourselves that we absolutely have value and we absolutely have talent and capability. And it's a matter of finding the place where we can make the best match to make that contribution. And that may take more time or less time, but one way or the other, we can either renew or reinvent ourselves and really think about those skills and talents that we have. and potentially use the opportunity to learn and grow in new directions, Like we might have a core set of talents, but we need to shore them up a little bit. We might need to develop in a few new directions in order to get ready for that next job or that next position. And that's good too. That's super fair because we always want to be learning and creating as human beings.
I love that feedback, because just on that, it goes to show, like, many of us in the travel industry, when planes completely got grounded, international travel in Australia came to a halt. People booking travel, people being flight attendants, pilots, all of that, the people that service the planes, all of that just completely came to a complete standstill. But then it's about, okay, how can I transfer these skills into other areas? And even with me, I was like, oh, I love books, so I can read books. I love to, like, I was already presenting and travel in the Maldives, but then it's like, okay, I can't fly to the Maldives, but how can I serve and help others? But really, if COVID-19 never happened, like, we wouldn't be probably sitting here today, and all of these opportunities to learn and grow and develop wouldn't have arisen. So as difficult as it's been, there's been so many, as they call it, silver linings or blessed gifts and opportunities of growth that have come from it. And I'm hearing this more and more from people. But just to see, there was someone on the news not long ago who was a pilot, who then couldn't get a job, obviously, as a pilot, international pilot, who then was able to drive machinery on a farm and have to go completely, away from their home. But then they were just so grateful to have a job and to be working. And I'm just seeing people really overcoming ego. Like, even one woman who had only ever been a pilot all of her life, who then has just gone to stacking shelves at the supermarket, which is completely worlds apart. But her ability to go, you know what, I've just got to do what I've got to do, and it is what it is. Do you think that approach to trying to separate ego, because the ego will go, I was at this level, I was making this much money, and now, like, look at me, but are you finding people who, I guess, overcome the ego and just go, I've just got to do what I've got to do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is the key to survival?
Yeah, completely. And I think sometimes it has to do with that time horizon, right? Like, keeping in mind that perspective. Like, I have to do something today, but today doesn't have to be forever. Like, I love the idea that your future self isn't predetermined. Whoever you are today, whatever you're doing today, will have continuity with who you are tomorrow and your identity tomorrow. But you have lots of opportunity between today and tomorrow to kind of reinvent. And so today you may just be stocking shelves. You may be stocking shelves. And by the way, there are lots of other people who stock shelves all the time, and all work has dignity. And you can work your way back to something else. You can shift that reality as the context shifts. Like, we have to remember that we've been in a global pandemic, right? Like I always love to say, everybody gets an asterisk for these couple years, like, somebody said to me, but my gosh, I've taken a step back. How do I reflect that on my resume? Well, it was a global pandemic. You get to take steps back and forward and around in circles. It's just been a crazy time. And keeping that time horizon in view, knowing that you can kind of invent and reinvent, I think, is another really big deal. And I think too, knowing that your career will evolve, it will change, knowing that all of those contributions to the community have value, reminding yourself of your resilience, I think, is a really big deal. There's a wonderful, we all know about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a very, very can be debilitating in a clinical kind of diagnosis. There's also post-traumatic growth. And the word emergency, the origin of the word emergency is emergere, which means to rise up or out. Post-traumatic growth is a real thing too. When we go through really, really difficult, catastrophic situations, we can have positive things like we learn more about ourselves. I never knew I could be so resilient. I never knew I could, get through this. So you get this greater sense of your own capability. A lot of times when you go through really, really hard times, you get a better sense of your priorities, right? Like the little stuff just falls away and you get this laser focus on, okay, this is what I've got to get through. And you also get a greater sense of connection to people. Like you learn who you can really rely on, who you can call in the middle of the night. And so I think that we can also kind of focus on this post-traumatic growth, this how we rise up and out. And it's hard. It's really hard to go through catastrophic times, but we can grow from them. We can learn from them. We will become kind of more ourselves as we learn about ourselves and learn about others through the process.
I love that post-traumatic, really that growth, because when I think about it, what the COVID-19 pandemic highlighted is the most important people are the people stacking the shelves, putting these products on the shelf. Before, as a society, we might have just thought, and I've met so many people stacking the shelves who are studying to become like heart surgeons or doctors or psychiatrists or, from all walks of life. And I think it reminded me of how we can never judge someone by the job they do or the job title. And obviously, if we didn't have people stacking shelves, we wouldn't be able to eat. And, these people were putting their lives on the line, actually serving us, going to work, doing the growth, like serving us at the checkouts, obviously the nurses, the doctors, the healthcare workers. We really got a sense of, some people then went, oh my goodness, I've just discovered I'm not essential. My job isn't essential. My actual career isn't essential. Like we saw health professionals, anyone working in mental health being essential. So have you seen that, Dr. Tracy Brower, where people have gone, wow, up until now, I thought I was so important. My job was so important, but I've just discovered, no, essential is health, essential is food, essential is it's been a real awakening, hasn't it?
Yeah, you make such a good point. I really love that. Yeah, I think I really, really like your comment that we can't judge people by their job. Like we all are making contributions to society, to the community, one way or the other. And what I get paid or the status of my job should be immaterial, right? I think the bigger question, and I love your points about ego, right? Like I might need to put my ego aside to do something different, or my ego might get a bit more in check going through this difficult situation where things are feel like they're upside down in terms of the social order that we've been used to. And I think it reminds us that every single person in the community is really critical. And all of us have something to offer. I always love the idea that everyone has something to teach and everyone has something to learn. And wherever you are in the community, you have something to teach, you have something to learn, you have something to receive, you have something to give. And one of the social concepts I love is reciprocity. Like when people give to us, we're more likely to give back to them. And that's what forms really the glue of society, the glue of communities. And so I think we want to always be thinking about, what are we contributing to the community in terms of our work, in terms of our job, in terms of our role, in terms of our position, and what are we giving to the community in terms of the stuff that we don't necessarily get paid for, but we're still making that contribution? There's some wonderful research that shows that generosity is incredibly correlated with happiness. And there have been a million studies on this. You're more satisfied at work. if you're more generous, even if you do things outside of work that are volunteer oriented, you'll be more satisfied in your work. But also they did this cool study where they gave everybody $5, whatever the right money system is for you. It was a small amount, and you could either buy something for yourself or you could buy something and give it to someone else. And then they asked people about their level of happiness. And always, in every case, the people who bought something and gave it to someone else were significantly happier. And so it's really about this kind of opportunity to give back to the community. So whatever that work looks like, whatever that job looks like, it's less about judging people for their social status and their work, and it's more about kind of doing our best to give back and doing our best to kind of be generous toward others.
I love that generosity and the research behind that, where we can practice that either outside of work or inside of work. And then that in itself can make us happier. And do you feel that even small acts of kindness, like smiling at work or saying hello to someone, can also increase happiness inside of work and outside of work? Because it's like transferable, isn't it?
Yes, 100%. That goes back to that social echoing, right? Like that's what we call it in the best terms, I think, is, when we demonstrate that positivity, we tend to rub off on other people, and years and years and years ago, there was a movie called The Accidental Tourist. It had, I think, Liam Neeson and Gina Davis, and it wasn't the best movie. I am no movie critic, so don't listen to me. Movie in the world, but I love the title, The Accidental Tourist. And I think we're all kind of accidental tourists to the extent that we don't realize the influence we have on other people. And leaders in particular have this responsibility. Like, people tend to overvalue leader responses, like we listen to the words that the leader used, or we watch the expression on the leader's face in the morning, or we listen to the tone of voice of the leader, and we can overemphasize that. And so we need to all be, leaders especially, and all of us need to be kind of cognizant of how we're coming across, because we really are infecting, quote unquote, other people. That's probably a bad word to use right now. We are influencing other people. We have a huge bearing on other people, more than we even realize. So absolutely, all those little things matter, right? It all matters.
Yeah. And Dr. Tracy Brower, when it comes to leaders, like we're going into our second year now of the pandemic, is it so important they continue to check in with people's mental health, that we continue? Because I'm hearing a lot of the psychiatrists and psychologists talk about chronic stress, how it impacts our health. Should we continue as teams, leaders, if there are leaders tuning in, thinking about also mental health and continuing that health and wellness aspect at the workplace and having the discussions around mental health?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things we've seen is statistically, so many people are struggling with mental health issues. Like, I follow so much research, and every single week, I'm not exaggerating, every single week there's a new study about people feeling depressed or anxious or socially isolated or really struggling with mental health. But there's also some wonderful research that suggests that when leaders are perceived as being more empathetic, when leaders are perceived as being more attentive and caring, people report greater levels of mental health. Like, it really matters. And you're not trying to check up on people, but you do want to check in with them. You want to ask questions, and obviously you're not going to be invasive. You're going to take cues from them about how much to ask about and how much support to give. And you can refer people to other services. You don't have to be a mental health expert yourself. But I think to demonstrate that level of humanity, to demonstrate that level of empathy, that you care, that you're listening, that you're paying attention, that makes a huge difference. And we're seeing companies there's this trend toward well-being in companies where companies are really looking at that holistic notion of not just physical or cognitive well-being, but also emotional well-being. And so I think we're more and more seeing companies that are offering lots of different tactics to support well-being, and understanding that it's strategic and central, that we need to really think about people and the conditions we're creating for them to be their best.
Oh, wow. I love your words of wisdom there. So, especially when you highlighted, it's not about checking up on them, it's about checking in and just having that empathy, empathetic, just checking in. That's such a great reminder, especially knowing that whilst they've got their day job, they might be worrying about their, example. My mum's in aged care, so with her health conditions and things, but everybody has their own thing going on, whether it's children or elderly family or relationships or whatever. But being conscious that before COVID, that wasn't such a big thing. But when you put stress on stress on stress on stress, it can really start to affect people. But I do love what you suggested too. I'm seeing, it's been incredible, meditation Mondays, wellness Wednesdays, and just seeing people embracing online apps. This is where social media comes into technology, when it's a Calm app or online yoga classes, and many places are really embracing this whole holistic wellness to help with mental health. So that has been another positive to come through. We're talking about mental health even in workplaces. I don't think I remember having mental health conversations, apart from we've always had Are You OK Day, which was created to ask people how they are, to check in, to try and prevent mental health illness, or to prevent, sadly, people dying from mental illness. So that's a charity which we every year, non-for-profit, do in our workplaces right across Australia. Are You OK? And that's from construction to corporate companies, to any job or any workplace, or even with friends and family. But then they ask to continue that conversation throughout the whole year and keep checking in. So, Dr. Tracy Brower, what inspired you to start writing books?
Oh, gosh, that's a great question. To start writing in general, I think for me, it's the way I think. I'll have these ideas swirling and things I'm curious about, and putting them in writing helps me think about them. It helps me kind of organize my thoughts, or discover my thoughts, or have more thoughts emerge. And so for me, it's part of the thinking process. It's also part of a process of curiosity. Like, if I've got a topic that I'm really curious about, then I want to learn more about it and research it. And then I'm capturing that in written form. So it's a way of capturing these interesting ideas and kind of putting them in a place. And then for me too, every now and then I have things I feel really opinionated about, and I know if I've got something I'm too opinionated about, I must write about it, because it's just the way to, get it on paper, get it out there. Maybe not even out there to the public, but out there in terms of my own ability to reflect on it and understand why I'm feeling opinionated about that topic. So for me, it's the thinking, it's the curiosity, it's the reflecting on my opinions, and reflecting and learning on an ongoing basis, discovering on an ongoing basis.
And you love to read. And I think that's why you and I just connected instantly. You not only love to help people feel happy at work, but also work and life. Because I love how you go, work's just not separate. That affects your life. And I love the concept that when I think about mental health and how much time we spend at work, it's so important we create our own happiness at work or from within. But you love to read. You're an avid reader. What do you love reading so much? You just touched on it then. Curiosity would be one, wouldn't it? But do you just find it to be a great way for even you to switch off from your work or career?
Totally. Yes. And I love to read lots and lots of different things, you know, like for me, reading is like being able to, I don't know, journey to different countries, to learn more about different people, to learn more about different situations. And when I'm reading, like I love to read both fiction and nonfiction. I love all kinds of fiction, all kinds of nonfiction. And I also love to read because I'm paying attention to the writing to some extent. I mean, sometimes you're not paying attention to the writing at all. You're just in the story. But sometimes it's like, oh, I love that phrase. Or, wow, that was a magical way to put together that sentence. Or, boy, that really made me giggle. You know, like I'm always so enamored, so respectful, so intrigued by how people use the written language and how we communicate with each other and how those can be so different, you know, like the way you string a sentence together or he strings a sentence together or she or I string a sentence together can be so different. And I think that's intriguing and fun too. And it's just fun to, you know, be in another world. Like I love to read dystopian fiction. It's one of my favorites. And it's partly because of so respecting the author's ability to create a world, to create a context, to create conditions that are so different than anything we're used to. I just think that's brilliant. It's a wonderful skill. So I love to read and experience that skill.
Your face is just lighting up. You can see how passionate you are. And here's the thing, like I love to read, and here goes a thing. We don't have to monetize everything we do. Like we can love the process of reading and just it can fill our own cup up and give us purpose. I'm finding through the global pandemic, it's been such a gift to see people pick up books again, to go back to their childhood dream of reading. We all know that when we were either having someone read a book to us, maybe our parents, or reading, that it just makes us feel like so young inside, like very kid-like. And to see this whole movement of people loving to read, I really feel even beyond the global pandemic, it's here to stay. COVID-19 and the pandemic has reunited so many people with the certainty you can get a book and read it. If there's anything certain, you can read, you know, because we talk about how everything is uncertain. I go, well, this is certain. You can get the book, hold it and read it. And that brings that stability back into our lives. But Dr. Tracy Brower, you are always helping other people to feel good at work or to find happiness at work or purpose. And how, though, do you fill up your own cup and take care of yourself? What are your self-care rituals?
Wow, that's great. I love what you were saying about reading gives us that certainty. I never thought about it that way before. That's really good. It's so interesting because we crave certainty neurologically, right? And we tend to steer away from ambiguity or uncertainty. So that makes so much sense. So I absolutely read as part of my self-care. Actually, you know, something else I do is I go to bed pretty early, and I go to bed early and I read for a little while before I, you know, turn out the light. And I get regular massages. I'm a huge fan of regular massages. I think that's so important. And I try to get a little alone time. Like I really, really like to walk, and I will often listen to books while I'm walking. And so I try to get that little bit of alone time. It's not always a lot. It's not every day. Sometimes it's not even every week. And I'm writing as a way for self-care. Like I said, it just helps me kind of mentally, emotionally. And I think I try to think through things and just really get support from others. Like if I can't work through something myself, I'll go to someone else, a really close confidant and say, I'm really struggling with this. Can you help me think about it? Can you give me another perspective? So for me, self-care also has to do with some of those really close relationships that I rely on.
Oh, that is so beautiful. And audiobooks, how great are they? That's just
Awesome.
like a book lover's dream where you can read books a little bit before bed. I love how you do that. And then you can walk listening to books. Like, it's really just a book lover's time. And so for anyone, I just love the ability of the audio or the written form. What inspired you to write your latest book? What was the moment you went, you know what? I'm going to write this book?
Yeah, it was really, actually, it's really funny the way the timing worked out. It was just all about wanting to think about happiness, wanting to think about how we can work in positive contexts, in positive situations. It was the desire to really remind us of how we're empowered and the agency that we all have. Those were the things that motivated it. And the timing was so interesting because I agreed with the publisher that I was going to write it before the pandemic, right? Things were starting to happen, but I don't think any of us had any idea that it was going to hit us. And then I literally started writing in March. And I remember reaching out to the publisher and saying, you know, how much should I include about the pandemic? We had no idea at that time, of course, what it was going to turn into. How much should I include? And then so I decided that I would reference it in the intro. And then I would really write without thinking about the pandemic, because no matter what, whatever those conditions were around us, it was going to be relevant to think about how we could be more happy at work. And then interestingly, the publication date was May 4, which is just as we're starting to come out of it, right? And we're not out of it everywhere, right? But the hopeful signs are there. So it's just been really interesting. The bookends of the writing process, the bookends of the publishing process have been so analogous with the pandemic itself. And so I love to think that this birth of the book, this publication date of the birth of the book, kind of is really nicely related to New Hope and where we go from here in terms of moving forward.
Yeah. Congratulations on your book, because it's incredible to see this book come out, because to be the focusing on the happiness, and I love how optimistic you are, and you have been along this whole journey of instead of getting caught in the doom and gloom of like the layoffs and people losing their job, you're always been a positive influence or a positive source of optimistic, of hope, sharing the positive stories, you know, and not the doom and gloom, because we can turn on the TV and we can get our good share of doom and gloom and fear, and that can really escalate our anxiety and things like that, and not be the greatest for our mental health. But I love how you are empowering people to find happiness in work and in life, and how it all correlates. If we can have a happier day at work and then we can go home happier, and vice versa, how it all like really weaves together as one, doesn't it?
Yeah, it totally weaves together. It's that spillover, that integration, the idea that there's kind of a container theory of work and life, that somehow they're separate. It's just a myth. Like, work is part of a full life, and it will be wonderful some days and not wonderful other days, and that's okay. And there are multiple right answers to how we navigate all of that, and it's all related, and we can embrace that and be really trying to be our best in all of the parts of our lives.
And Dr. Tracy Brower, have you found that people now say that they get the opportunity to go back to work? They have the best coffee machine there. They get to make a free coffee. That the level of happiness is really, people are being more grateful for the small things, which is now going to increase their happiness at work. Whereas before we might have taken that free coffee for granted, or that free piece of fruit.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, like that's part of the human condition, right? neurologically, we tend to get used to things. We start to take them for granted. And that's just normal, right? Like we can't pay attention to every single thing, every single detail, or we'd go crazy. You have to adapt. And sometimes that means you're no longer consciously aware of it. And through their absence, now we're so grateful for all those things, the great coffee at work, or even the drive to work. Like I have time to think on the way there and think on the way home. And that colleague that I've been missing, who, I don't know, maybe they annoyed me a little bit, but I kind of miss them now. It is, you like appreciate through the absence of some of those things, and it brings more of those things to the surface. It makes you more conscious of them again in a good way.
So we can create happiness then at work just purely by being more appreciative, like appreciating even the people. Like we can appreciate maybe that person annoyed us, but I'm really grateful they are alive, and we haven't lost them. Because we know that some people are going to be returning to workplaces, and sadly, maybe one of their colleagues has been lost in this tragedy of the pandemic. So that I'm finding when I even appreciate, wow, what a gift to be here. Like you and I today doing this podcast show about happiness at work, about your books and how we can be happier at work and in life. What a blessing that we're here today, throughout this global pandemic and creating this show to help other people to feel good from within.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And it's interesting how this moment has allowed us to connect in new ways across boundaries and across borders that we might not have made connections before, and to kind of appreciate the little things. There's a great quote by Robert Brault that says, "Appreciate the little things in life because someday you'll realize they were the big things." Isn't that just lovely? So it really is about, like being present in the moment, feeling a level of gratitude, expressing generosity, really investing in relationships, really reflecting and making good choices, the best choices you can, right? In terms of the conditions that you set for yourself. There are all those things that contribute to happiness at work and the ways that we can create it for ourselves.
I love this. Now, I could talk to you forever, hence the talk show part, hence why I love talking. But Dr. Tracy Brower, what is now your wish or your hope for your book readers?
Yeah, I hope they feel empowered. Like, I hope they get some new ideas. I hope they feel empowered about how they can create the conditions for happiness. I hope they'll reach out, like if they see things differently, if they have a different opinion, if they have ideas. I would just love that. Like, I really, really like to discover and learn from others. And I know that we all have really different perspectives. And so at the same time that they're empowered and I hope they can find new levels of happiness, I'm also super interested to learn from them as well.
Well, I can't wait to hear what our Spirit Girl Book Club readers think about your books. You've got 2 books. How can we stay in touch with you now after this podcast show?
Thank you for asking. People can reach out if they happen to be on LinkedIn. It's Tracy Brower, PhD, or I'm on Twitter. I think it's tbrower108. And my website, which has everything, is tracybrower.com. So that's probably the easiest. And then they can get to all the other places.
Wonderful. And I'll make sure I keep all of the links in the podcast notes. But Dr. Tracy Brower, thank you for all of the work you do. Thank you for being super curious about what makes people happy at work and for really elevating that conversation. When you started this journey 25 years ago, being happy at work wasn't on trend. It really is now, but you've been one of the pioneers really diving in and focusing on what can make us happy. And I love your constant message, though. It's okay if we don't feel happy all the time. We're not going to live in the world of the unicorns and the fairies and, being on a happy little bubble. that it's okay. And I just love how you are really real about that. So thank you for all of the work you do to help other people to feel good from within. And thank you for joining us today on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor, and can't wait to keep this conversation up with you throughout the many, many more years to come. So thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. I love our conversation. I love what you have to say. So I really, really appreciate our time together and our discussion. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will say officially goodbye to Dr. Tracy Brower. Thank you for being part of the Spirit Girl Talk Show. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good from within. Bye.